The backwaters of Russia, where the winters are colder than the heart of your ex. In 1869, Rasputin was born in a small Siberian village. His family was poor, like eating boiled shoe leather for dinner poor. But despite the hardships, he grew up to be a big and strong young man with a mop of unruly hair and eyes, so charming that could seduce a stone-cold nun into sin faster than you can say, "Hail Mary." As a young man, Rasputin didn't exactly have a clear career path laid out for him. He tried his hand at farming for a while, but he didn't find much luck with the crops. So he did what any self-respecting Siberian would do: drink the booze and love the whores. At the age of 18, he settled down and got married to a local girl. He had babies with her. Ooh boy, he had many babies with her. In fact, he had babies with women all over his town. So I wish I could tell you that their love was a story for the ages, but it wasn't exactly a match made in heaven. His marriage was about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. Rasputin was a free spirit, a wild stallion who couldn't be tamed. He could charm the pants off anyone with nothing but a wink and a smile. And that is something you might envy, considering your own charisma is about as captivating as a wet sock at a funeral. He was also quite the party animal when it came to drinking. He had a reputation for being able to hold his liquor like a champ, knocking back vodka shots like they were nothing more than glasses of water. But then, one day, Rasputin has an epiphany. It's like a bolt of lightning striking him right in the brain, illuminating the path that he was always meant to follow. And on that fateful day, he realizes that he's not just some ordinary schlub wandering the earth aimlessly. He's a chosen one, a vessel for the divine to work its will upon. See, children, this is why you should not do too much drugs. Don't do it. So Rasputin sets out to spread the word, like a modern-day prophet preaching the gospel of enlightenment to anyone who will listen. He travels from village to village, sharing his message of spiritual awakening with anyone who will lend him an ear. And wouldn't you know it, people start flocking to Rasputin like he's the second coming of, well, whoever you think the first coming was. They're drawn to his magnetic personality that seems to shine with an otherworldly glow. Rasputin claimed to have all sorts of supernatural abilities, from healing the sick to predicting the future. And whether you believe it or not, there were plenty of people who were willing to take him at his word. Before long, Rasputin had built up quite the reputation as a holy man with a direct line to the divine. People would travel from far and wide just to catch a glimpse of him, hoping that some of his mystical mojo would rub off on them. And Rasputin, being the charismatic son of a gun that he was more than happy to oblige. He would often return home with a group of his female admirers and would host wild rituals at his house, where he'd entertain a rotating cast of women who were more than happy to indulge his every whim. Well, seems like he was running his own personal harem. But hey, to each their own, I guess. But Rasputin's not content to just be some small-town mystic. Oh no, he's got bigger fish to fry. He sets his sights on the most powerful family in Russia, the Romanovs. Now, you'd think the Romanovs would be too busy ruling over their empire to pay any attention to some lowly peasant like Rasputin, but oh no, that's where you'd be wrong. You see, the Romanovs were a superstitious bunch, always on the lookout for someone who could help them with their various ailments and troubles. And that's where Rasputin comes in. He manages to worm his way into the inner circle of the Romanovs, like a snake slithering through the grass. He even befriends the Tsarina, Empress Alexandra herself, and does what he does best: drink the booze and love the queen. Now, you might be thinking, how the heck did he manage to pull that off? Well, Tsar Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra had a son named Alexei. He was a sweet kid, but had a condition called hemophilia that made his blood unable to clot properly. It was like living life with a ticking time bomb inside him. Even the slightest bruise can potentially lead to life-threatening bleeding. And as you can imagine, that made life pretty darn stressful for the royal family. But along came Rasputin, like a beacon of hope in a sea of despair. Somehow, someway, Rasputin managed to convince the Empress that he was the only one who could save her son. Whether it was through his supposed mystical powers or just his undeniable charisma, Rasputin had the Empress eating out of the palm of his hand faster than you can say magic potion. And sure enough, Rasputin seemed to have a knack for calming Alexei's symptoms whenever he was around. Whether it was through prayer, hypnosis, or just good old-fashioned luck, Rasputin somehow managed to ease the young prince's suffering in ways that no doctor could ever do. Rasputin had this whole holier-than-thou attitude when it came to healing. So he saw all the doctors as his nemesis. His disdain for the medical establishment was as legendary as his beard. There is also this incident when the royal family goes on a vacation far away from home, and suddenly, Alexei starts complaining about a pain in his thigh. That might not sound like a big deal, but remember, Alexei had hemophilia. So you can imagine the panic that ensued in the royal family, frantically trying to figure out what to do to help their beloved son. Empress Alexandra writes a telegram to Rasputin asking him to pray for her son. Now, Rasputin wastes no time springing into action. He writes a letter back to Empress Alexandra saying, "God has seen your tears and heard your prayers. Fear not, the kid will not die, and don't let those motherfucking doctors anywhere near the kid." She takes his advice to heart and refuses to allow any doctors to treat Alexei with medication. And sure enough, Alexei's condition miraculously improves, and just like that, Rasputin becomes a hero in the eyes of the Empress. Before long, Rasputin was practically running the show behind the scenes, whispering in the ears of the Tsar and Empress like he was their closest advisor. He had them wrapped around his finger. And so, Rasputin's fame continued to grow until he became something of a celebrity in Russian society. He was rubbing shoulders with the elite, hobnobbing with dukes and duchesses like he was one of them. But despite his newfound status, Rasputin remained true to his nature. Drink the booze and love the whores. He publicly and frequently engaged in all sorts of sex, alcohol, and drugs. He was like a real-life rock star, living life on the edge and thumbing his nose at anyone who dared to question his behavior. Enter Khioniya Guseva, one of Rasputin's followers, hanging on his every word like he was the second coming of, well, whoever you think the first coming was. But then something happened. Rasputin allegedly turned his back on Guseva, casting her aside like yesterday's garbage. This made Guseva angry. She was so angry that she took a big awl knife, stabbed Rasputin with it, and tore open his gut 14 inches wide. Despite the pain, he somehow managed to fight her off and escaped with his life. But that's not even the craziest part. Rasputin's wounds were pretty darn serious, like call an ambulance right now serious. But instead of rushing to the hospital like any normal person would, Rasputin decides to go home and take a nap. That's right, he just brushes off being stabbed like it's nothing more than a mosquito bite and goes about his day like nothing happened. This would be the first time Rasputin cheated death, but would certainly not be the last. It's 1916, the First World War is raging on, and tensions are running high. The Russian people are growing increasingly discontent with their rulers, and Rasputin is strutting around like he owns the place. But not everyone is thrilled about Rasputin's influence in the politics of the Russian Empire. There were plenty of people in Russian society who saw Rasputin as nothing more than a snake in the grass who was leading the royal family down a path of ruin. So a plan to assassinate Rasputin was hatched by a group of nobles who were fed up with his meddling in Russian politics. The plan was so crazy it just might work. They lured Rasputin to a party under the pretense of indulging in his favorite pastime. You know it. Drink the booze and love the whores. It's December 29, 1916, and Rasputin walks into the home of Prince Felix Yusupov, one of the nobles who's headed up to here with Rasputin's antics. Felix offered him some cakes which are poisoned with cyanide. Rasputin ate them all and asked for some more. Nothing happened to him. Next, Felix offered him some wine which is also poisoned with cyanide. Rasputin drank 3 bottles of it and let out a huge burp. Again, nothing happened. When Felix asked him how he was feeling, he said, "This stuff is good. I'm feeling awesome." Felix had enough. He took out his gun and shot Rasputin 3 times. 1 in the chest, 1 in the back, and 1 in the head. Now you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? But oh no, not for Rasputin. He somehow manages to cling to life, like a cockroach surviving a nuclear apocalypse. But Rasputin's enemies aren't about to let him off that easy. Oh no, they've come too far to let him slip through their fingers now. So they do the only logical thing. They wrap Rasputin's body in a rug and toss him into the icy waters of the Never River like he's yesterday's garbage. And just like that, Rasputin's wild ride comes to an end. There's no denying that Rasputin's life was one heck of a roller coaster ride from start to finish. And even in death, his legend lives on, like a ghost haunting the annals of history.